Hey, welcome back. This is Richard with another Silhouette Studio based tutorial. Real quick before we get started, I want to thank you for coming and checking out the video with me. The next couple of videos that I'll be posting are most likely going to be for laser engraving. I'm not done with Silhouette Studio, so don't panic. If you have any questions, concerns, or anything that you need help learning or troubleshooting, please still feel free to let me know, and I can sneak in videos here and there. But I will be making a couple of laser engraver tutorials. If that interests you, great. If not, it might be a couple of weeks before I get another Silhouette Studio tutorial in, so just keep that in mind. But I am definitely not done, and we'll be making hopefully plenty more as time moves forward. But with that out of the way, let's jump in. In today's video, we're doing some tracing tricks or techniques that I use to have more success with my projects. I've had this question asked quite a bit lately, where people are struggling with tracing or using parts of designs and things in their projects. And so I wanted to cover a couple ways we can accomplish that. So first, let's just jump the one that is arguably the best solution, but is the only one that we're going to cover that's a premium feature, which is our trace by color option here on our trace panel. This little eyedropper one. And you'll see we have a trace by color option. Again, this requires an upgrade on the software. So if you're running the free version, this will be blank. You will not have this option. It might be a reason for you to upgrade, but if not, don't worry. I've got 3 or 4 more other options we're going to cover here in just a moment. So trace by color, you choose trace by color, and you select what you want. So if we want to trace this blue color, which I missed, I apparently clicked right next to the blue color. There we go. You'll see it starts as solid fill and a single area. And our single area isn't very good because if you're familiar with PC graphics, like when we used to do, Windows Paint and things, the shades of blue are slightly different. And so it has selected the clump of blues that are exactly the same and touching. So if we choose all areas, you'll see now a lot of the blue is covered, but we've still got lots of holes, and that's where our tolerance comes in here, just like our standard trace. The higher you bring this up, the more it's going to try to trace. And then as you bring it down, it's going to trace less and less to where it's almost doing nothing. So you would choose an appropriate amount. And sometimes for this, it's a lot easier to zoom in so you can see some details and try to avoid any issues that may come from being too high. You'll see as you go up too much, you start to round out a lot of the stars. They get kind of ugly. And as you go down too far, you'll start to miss little sections here and there. You've got holes in the little sphere at the top and things like that. So picking a nice middle ground where you cover everything the best you can. It's never quite perfect because you are copying, in this case, a JPEG image, but get it to where you're pretty satisfied. Choose trace. And you can move that out of the way, and you'll see that everything that was blue, we now have as a separate piece. If we turn this off, it looks a little more the same. That's now blue. You could do the same thing, trace by color, choose your red, choose all areas, bump up your tolerance, push trace. This one very quick, I don't need to be as precise. And same thing, we've got our layer here. You could line it up as best you want. If you're cutting it with vinyl, it wouldn't ultimately matter. And you've got your piece replicated. If you wanted an exact match of the colors, you can use your little eyedropper tool here, and you could select the blue from this image, and you'll see that carries over to our trace. And then, if you're not familiar, because this seems to be a little unknown to some, is if you wanted to replicate this in, say, vinyl or a cardstock, where you wanted to do a red and a blue cut separate, versus cutting this entire design from one piece of vinyl or paper. When we go to send this project, let me move it on to here so it's easier to tell. You'll see right now everything is set to cut. We're just on the standard cut. If it has cut lines, it will cut with this setup. But if we choose the fill option here, which a lot of people, if you're in the Facebook groups, tend to say cut by color, it's actually called fill because it's the fill color used that will be actually cut. So you'll see it's selected these options by default, which may or may not be what you're looking for. So you'll see I used the blue, the red, and then we have a transparent. So right now the blue is set to cut with this check mark. You'll see if we turn it off, those thick blue cut lines go away. So we've got now blue is set to cut. So you would load your blue paper or your blue vinyl onto your Silhouette machine. You would send here. It would cut the blue. Then you would come in, you'd turn off your blue, turn on the red, load your red material, and send that. And you would have a red cut and a blue cut. Obviously, you'd want to, kind of put it up into the corner of your piece so you don't waste any of your materials. But that will allow you to cut the blue on blue paper, vinyl or otherwise. And the same with the red. That way you're not cutting the whole design and weeding out and throwing away part of it that you don't need to cut. So this panel seems to get missed, especially by a lot of new users. So this could be very helpful, so I wanted to include that. So let's get the premium stuff out of the way. On to what you can do with the free version, or premium if you have it too. I do all of these tricks to some level at some point. The different projects require different approaches depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So the next one, we can just cover the standard trace, and you can see what it does with this design. If we trace this one, if you've seen it, if I could talk today, if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know I always bring the scale all the way down to the bottom, and that alleviates some of the jaggedness on the edges, that as you bring this higher and higher, it's kind of hard to tell depending on the design, but you'll get a lot more like of this stair stepping that happens here. So I always bring this down to the bottom and then adjust your threshold as needed. The same as the trace by color option. The higher, the more it traces. The lower, the less to zero that it traces. And you're just going to pick a decent balance. And again, you can zoom in onto some of the important areas like stars and just kind of see what gets properly kind of filled out with the trace. That all looks decently filled in to me, and we can choose trace. And this is the quick, easy trace that people seem to do and expect kind of miracles with it. And you'll see it got a good trace, no problems there. But if we add a color, this is where a lot of people start to get frustrated, is if we give this a color, the entire trace is one piece. So we've traced all of that turned yellow is now all the same color. There are a couple of ways to fix this. One, which people tend to get a little overwhelmed with, it's more common in like CNC work and stuff, so a lot of new users aren't super familiar, but compound paths. And basically it's the short version is where a shape is cut out of another shape. So in this design, all of these stars would be a compound path to cut holes in this flag shape. So if we release the compound path, you'll see all of those stars are no longer holes, that they are just loose little blue stars that are separate now from the flag since we have released it. And so since we've released the compound path, now every piece that isn't touching is its own separate piece. So we did just a standard trace. We got all the colors at once. What I like to do is create the compound path of all these holes. Anything that's going to be missing, if you will, from your design, combine all of that first. So you can just drag and select. Or if you don't have 51 things to select like I do, you could just shift-click the couple things that you need to combine. But I'm going to drag select this whole area. And you'll see in doing that, I've got a couple of these boxes around these other items indicating they've been selected as well. So just a shift click will unselect those. So what I have now is this flag, or sorry, the flag pole, and all 50 stars. I'm assuming there's 50. I didn't count them, but 50 stars are all selected. And we'll right click and choose to make the compound path. And so we're back to the holes being stars, which you might think was a waste of time, but this piece is now separate, that we only box selected this area and created the holes. So in doing so, we now have the blue like our image, and all of these flag bits are all still separate. So we can choose everything here and shift click to unselect the flag piece we just created. And now if we make this red, all of those stripes of our flag have changed to red. And if you want, so they don't get moved by accident, because you obviously don't want to do something like that, you can select all of these, or if they're still selected, you can choose to group them here at the top and now this will move as one unit. So that's another good option. And again, you could cut this as is, or you could go in and you could choose the fill type and choose to cut just the red or the blue, which I'm not on the cut area, so you can't see it. I like to show everything for new users so they don't miss any of the important details. But it works exactly the same way. You'll see as I click the blue, the dark blue outline comes into play, showing it'll be cut. If I uncheck the red, you'll see that those cut lines go away. So it works exactly the same way, but we accomplished it without needing the trace by color feature. And you've got both pieces separate if you want. Or maybe you want to cut it as one piece, like a white decal on, say, like a car window. You wouldn't need to release the compound path. That standard trace, just like this. Then it was roughly there. We'll go for perfect. We'll just replicate it real quick. Did I miss? There it goes. Maybe this is all you want, then there's no reason to release it. You could just make it white for reference, and it would look like this on your car window or your laptop or wherever you were going to put it. So maybe you want this design, but you don't care that it's a single color. Then that could be an option as well. But if you wanted to get close to replicating the actual image, this is another workaround to get the two different color options. Another choice, depending on the image, which is why I have this Sonic one pulled into the software, is you can use this little tab or option here, which is the image effects. This can come in really handy depending on the image you're trying to trace, and I use it, I want to say every time, if not a good majority of the time, when it's an image like this, where the background is black. Because the way that trace works, if we trace this, is it's looking for the dark contrast within the image. So it sees all of the flag because compared to the white background, this dark contrast of color stands out. Well, this Sonic image is backwards. That what we want to trace is actually white. If we wanted to cut the shape of Sonic, it's going to trace everything in the background, which might be what you're looking for if you wanted something like a stencil. But if you wanted this to be a sticker for, again, say your car or something, that would not be the desirable option. And you'll see that if I do a trace. Maybe. There it goes. And if we give this a color, because Sonic's usually like a blue, you'll see that everything but what we want has been filled in. So there's a couple ways to, again, fix this. For one like this, I have a preferred method, but I'll show you how we can use this Edit tab first, and how I use it most often. There are different benefits that you can take, like the gray shade here. I picked the color image because black and white won't do anything. You can slide this over, and you'll see that our flag goes more grayscale. Oops, I misclicked. You see it goes more grayscale as you go closer to 100%. So again, when your contrast is white to a foreground color, depending on what you're tracing, it might not be enough contrast. So going grayscale may be enough to make that pop off of the white. And if you like where it's at, you can apply that. Same with like hue. You can change the colors of the image, which may make a better contrast to where you can trace either the whole image or a part of the image more effectively. I use the brightness quite a bit to kind of enhance different parts of the image. As you go brighter, any like the light yellow colors and things will start to disappear. They'll blow out into the background. And so that can be helpful, again, depending on what you're looking for. You can see something like this. Now only the red is seen. You can't see the blue anymore. Again, this is going to trace the black portion. But this could potentially be beneficial, again, depending on your project. But where this comes in, that I use it the most, is this little button here, which is your color inversion. So any color, if you're familiar with the color wheel, will be flipped to its opposite color. So black becomes white. You'll see, like in the flag picture here, it's currently black with red. If I invert this, oh, I forgot, default's back because I didn't apply. It's red and blue. If I switch the inversion up, these are the inverted colors. So the opposite of that blue is kind of this pea soup green, and the opposite of the red we're using is kind of this teal Tiffany blue color. So with something like tracing this Sonic, we saw we got the opposite of what we wanted. Well, we have an inversion option. So if we take our image, black with the white that we want to trace, and we 100% invert it, you'll see now we have a white image with a black line, exactly like we would want to trace. So now it's a very simple standard trace. Bring your scale down to the bottom. Zoom in so we can see our details so we don't miss anything important. And up or lower your threshold based on your desired effect. And it looks pretty good. I'm trying to get these little points and things to be properly lit up so he's fully traced. And you'll see in doing that, we get a couple of ugly spots. So you can either bring it down a little bit to get rid of the ugliness. See how much that does. It's actually in the design, it looks like. There's a couple little gray spots there. So you can bring it down enough that they go away, but sometimes, like in this image, you start to lose everything of importance. So what I would rather do is bring it up high enough to get all the details that I'm looking for, bring all the points to be nice. Yeah, everything looks good that we need. Looks like there's just a couple small little specks around him that aren't ideal, but that's an easy fix. So you can do a trace, move this out of the way, and you'll see now if we add a color, we're going to do that blue. Now it is the way that we would normally want. There are times you would want this style, like I said, especially with like a stencil. You can see through that part. So if this was cut out of vinyl, you could stick it onto something and like spray paint, a color through the cracks and then peel up the vinyl, which in this instance, this is exactly what you would want. And then if you wanted to make this trace, which is now very nice, just a little bit better, you could go back and clean up these couple of ugly spots with the point edit here on the side. You'll see there's some clusters of kind of ugliness here. So you can, oops, my computer's catching up. Sorry, I've got a lot going on. There we go. So you can click a point and then hit delete on your keyboard, and you'll see that those points go away. And same with like this one, there's like a little bubble on his nose that shouldn't be there. So you can delete points to get it where you need. There we go. And you can take a peek and see it looks like it's a little squared off. So you can change the angle if need be with these little slider handles. You can move it in or out or whatever you need with that point to get the effect you're going for. But you can clean it up quite a bit. Since no trace is going to be perfect, some are a lot better than others. But you can get adjustments made to get a more rounded look if that's what you're going for. And just quickly clean up some of these little specks that didn't quite work out. But going with a black background like this Sonic can be a hassle. So using this image effects into the invert tab and bringing it all the way up to 100 will flip the colors 100% their opposites. So white to black being what I use it for the most. Sorry for the quick change on the screen. I was getting ready to upload the video and realized that I had forgotten a step that I meant to show. So I'm editing this one back in. So I showed how to invert the image and trace the white area and said there's another technique that I used and then I never actually recorded it. So that here is the other technique. So we can trace this as is, which as we said is the dark section of the image, which is what you would want in the case of something like a stencil. So it does definitely have its uses. But if we trace this and it's basically backwards, which you'll see again if we give it a color, let's give it white this time. Generally, this is the opposite of what we want. However, instead of inverting the image so that it's white with black, we can do that, and I do it a fair amount, but you can edit this image so that it flips everything. And with something like a square, it works great, so I'll do it this way a lot. You do a quick double click, or you can just manually select the edit points. Click on any of the points of your little square, or rectangle, whichever it may be, and just delete it. And now, because that's no longer the outside of the image, now that has created the perimeter of our image. If we get rid of that line, you'll see now we have a nice trace of the image itself. It could be cut this way and applied. You'll see though, just like before, we still have those ugly points that you could double click and edit according to what you're looking for, clean up anything that you're not okay with, and make any changes needed. So yeah, you can either invert the image here, just flipping this over, and then doing a trace of the black, or you can trace it with the black background and delete the background and get the same effect. So I just wanted to edit that in there so that way anyone that could benefit from it didn't miss out on that tip. And then the last thing I want to cover, which I use again depending on the project, I'm going to delete this one. I've kind of messed that one up. Let me drag in a new copy of it here, just so it's not so messy. I'm going to delete some of this extra clutter, bogging down the computer. It's a lot of edit points. The other trick that I'll use, again, depending on the project, let's say we want to trace just the red of this image. We can take our little polygon tool here. You can use the rounded corners or the square corners. I almost always use the square ones because they're a little, we'll call it a little more predictable. And what I would do is mark off the area that I don't want traced. So in this case, the blue portion of the flag. Doesn't matter how sloppy it is, as long as you don't cover what you want to trace, and it does cover what you don't want traced. And then you can switch that to your background color. In this case, it's white. You could just choose white. But I like to use the eyedropper and select the background color. That way you have an exact match and there's no conflict or no problems. And I always try to make a part of this shape that I've drawn go outside of the image. That way it's easy to see and select, because I'm going to turn off this red line. So now it's just the red that's visible. And now when we run a standard trace, you're basically getting the trace by color effect because the blue can't be seen. So we bring our scale down, bring our threshold up to what looks good. Oh, bring the scale down. Bring the threshold up to what looks good. Hit a trace. And then we can move that out of the way, and you'll see if I click this space that's on the outside, which is why I leave a little bit outside of the photo, I can click this and hit delete. I've still got my full image, and I can take our stripes and make them red. So that's a way to do a kind of a trace by color without needing to do a trace by color, is that you can physically block off a portion. So when it looks for that contrast, it can't see the blue. It's buried under that temporary white layer. And if we do the same thing the other way, so do the trace by color of blue, if you will, and block it off on the other side. Oops, I went too far on that one. Just a quick undo, easy solution. And again, outside of the photo, just for the ease of selecting it later. We'll make that white. We'll delete our little boundary line. Choose to select a trace. And same thing, bring the scale down, bring this up to wherever looks good. I'm just going to rush through it for that one. We get the point. Oops, I moved the whole image. I want the little trace. Just the little trace. Thank you. And you can put that wherever it needs to go. And again, you can make it whatever color you need. So we have something like that. And we've now done our two trace by color options. We didn't have to release the compound path. We didn't have to do anything extra complicated other than very quickly draw a blob shape. And then the last little bonus point that I want to cover, I've had a few people ask because I design a lot of my own stickers, which are inspired by other artists, and I use some portions of their pieces and stuff to enhance mine. And so if we wanted to take this flag art that I found on Google and kind of personalize it, make it a little more our own, if you want more than just blue and red, like in real life, the flagpole isn't going to be blue. This is realistically going to be like a rope or a chain holding the flag. You're not going to have it be blue in probably 99.9% of cases. So if you wanted to make this a little more personalized, maybe a little more realistic, in my mind, I see this being a total of 4 colors. Obviously, the field of stars would be blue. Our pole is usually some kind of metal, like a steel or something. So we're going to have like a silver color, either that same color for the ball or maybe like a gold ball in a lot of cases. And then in my mind, I see a rope. I've seen them with chains, but I'm picturing like a rope. So some kind of white or off-white. And there's a couple ways again that you can do this relatively easy. And I use the same tool, this little polygon tool. And I will just cut off by drawing a shape the area that I want. So let's start with the rope. So this line kind of continues in this direction. So that's what I'm going to draw. So I'm going to come across that rope, if you will, like so, and just draw out. Again, it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to go around whatever shape we want to change the color of. We want to drag and select or shift click, either's fine, but the shape we just drew and the part we're going to change. And go over here to your Modify tab, this little rectangle with a circle cut through it. And we are going to do Divide, which you'll see is exactly the same picture. It cuts one shape with the other. So we divide, and it looks like we've ruined it. But you'll see this rectangle shape that we cut has had that shape we had cut out of it. So this leftover piece is that blue we had before. So you'll see if we make it the same color, it looks exactly like it did before, except for now it has a cut line at the top. So if we're making this a rope, maybe we want it to be a white color or very close to white. Maybe you want to go to your color palette and make it slightly more yellow. So a lot of ropes have like a yellow thread to them, maybe something in that ballpark, just so it's not white. We can turn off our little border line because I find it distracting. And now we've got our little rope piece that you could cut from like a white or a yellow vinyl, or maybe this is going to be a sticker and it could be printed in this color. And you can do that with whatever you want. You could do the little sphere at the top the same way. You can do, like I said, the square corners, the curves. This being a circle, you could do the ellipse tool and draw a circle around it. It all works the same way. It's just a matter of getting an angle that cuts it and looks good. With a circle like this, I probably wouldn't use the squared polygon tool, but getting it cut so that you get a fairly good looking shape. But obviously you don't want a straight line across it or it would look very unnatural. So getting something that's at least in the ballpark, for this being just a practice draw, I'm not going to make it perfect, but something to that extent. Again, select both the image you drew and the part we're going to kind of crop or edit. Modify tab, divide. Let's cut the big circle, the little circle out of the big circle. We don't need this anymore. You can delete it or move it off to the side. And click our little ball. We want it to be a nice gold color, maybe something kind of like that. Remove our outside line that's kind of distracting. And you'll see now we have a little gold orb on top of our flagpole. And there's only one left, we might as well do it. Draw our little shape. Doesn't have to be perfect, but obviously, depending on your project, the closer you are, the better. And to me, this looks off. You'll see the flag here versus the pole. There's like a weird swing up here that I don't like. That if I drag this basically straight up, there's a lot of extra right here. So to get the look I would want, I would edit the points a little. You can see there's a lot of points. So I would delete a couple of these just because there's too much fluff. Drag this more over here so we have like a straight pole like you would have with a flag. So delete a couple of these extra just so we have a nice, relatively straight design. And again, you could spend more time on it. It was an important project. Once this video is over, I'm just going to delete it. So now you can see if we come in here and go up, it looks a lot cleaner. There's a nice straight post. And the yellow piece we know is a different piece now, so we can just draw right up over the top of it because we're not going to select that part. Drag our way down here. So we made it a separate piece just a moment ago. And then our selection tool, we want to select again that piece we just drew and the blue. And our modify tab and divide. You'll see when we move this, it hasn't affected the yellow in any way because the yellow is a separate piece. We only selected the blue part to be edited. So we can get that out of the way. We can choose our color for this. Maybe again, like we said, maybe like a nice kind of silver color, which unfortunately blends in with the background pretty well. So if we took all of this, we could group it, put it on our little cut area, and you'll see now we've got our silver pole, our little gold ball, our rope color, and the two original red and blue, just like in the design. So that's kind of a little extra bonus that it's part of what I do with tracing, but you can go through and you can edit and manipulate it to your likings or for your demands of your projects. So maybe you wanted part of this cut off, you could do the same sort of technique. If, say, something was blocking this side, you could do the same thing. Do a divide. It's going to cut into that. And now these are separate pieces that you could delete, move, change the color of, and that could be a thing too. If it maybe was a little bit darker, you could take the color, this one. This is the color we used. You could make it darker and have it be more like a shadow, or you could have it blocked by something else. So there's a lot of editing potential available. So maybe something's in the way and you've modified the shape like so. So with that, I think that covers basically everything I do as far as tracing is concerned. Again, we've got the trace by color option for premium users. I believe that's on every upgrade, but I have business. I know it's in the business for sure. And I'm mostly positive that it's in the designer upgrade as well. I just know it's not a free option. After that, we have our normal trace, which will get you things like this, just for single color type designs, which is very good. Oh, I deleted Sonic. On one like Sonic, where it was just a black line on a white background, it works great. We've got the editing with our little, I've heard it called like the yin yang here, even though it's like two halves. Mostly used, like I said, for me personally with this inversion feature to switch black backgrounds to white or white to black, depending on what your project calls for. So I use this by far the most, but I will occasionally use these three sliders to enhance portions of an image. And then being able to draw a shape and choosing divide to break up portions of an image. And it doesn't have to be traced to do that, but for breaking up a traced image and personalizing it more to your needs and your project. So with that, I think that wraps up today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out and sitting through it with me. I appreciate the likes and subscribes. And like I said, the next couple should realistically be laser engraver videos and tutorials. I got a couple new ones in the mail I'm going to set up, do a couple of assembly videos, a couple of overall reviews, and then probably come back into the silhouette tutorials and stuff from there. But like always, if you have any questions, leave them below. Or if you're in the Facebook groups, feel free to send me a message. And I will happily make videos to help out people when I can. I don't mind doing silhouette videos as well as laser videos. I just know I have a couple laser ones on the horizon. So until next time, thanks for sitting it out with me, and happy crafting.